Welcome to the Kitcar History File series, where we'll be going through the industry's past. We'll be visiting old marks of long ago, some modern ones, some mostly older stuff. A lot of archive information with photographs and information on the cars they made, the people involved, and what happened to them.
Hey, this is Andy Powell of Wishbone Ash, and you're listening to the Total Kit Car on YouTube.
Hi, welcome to the Total Kitcar YouTube channel. My name's Steve Hull, editor of TKC Mag and totalkitcar.com, and I'd like to welcome you along once again to another episode of the Total Kitcar History File series. First off, time of writing this in early January 2024. Writing this as a magazine veteran for you. At the time of recording this in early January 2024, just getting over a bit of a chest infection, which has left me sounding like Darth Vader. So I do apologise for the sound effects that you weren't expecting, so forgive me. Anyway, this episode we're going to look at, I think, the automotive equivalent of the Wombles of Wimbledon Common. Overseas listeners, you need to Google that. I'm not going down that rabbit hole, but I will use that analogy to describe the Outspan Orange car, which is what we're covering today, which, like the Wombles, was a novelty, but very good for promotion, and was designed by a very talented, serious designer by the name of Brian Waite. Much like the man behind the Wombles was Mike Batt, a musical genius, if ever there was one. Let's get that out of the way. Anyway, let's look at Brian Waite's career in a little bit of potted history alongside that. He was born in Bristol in 1942. His father was a pilot for BOAC, British Overseas Airlines, and at age just 15, Brian got an apprenticeship at Aston Martin, as you do, starting off as a lowly gopher come tea-boy come butt of all jokes, I suppose, but he learnt a lot very quickly. John Wyer was the Aston Martin race team manager back then, and I think he was a hard taskmaster and pretty scary, I imagine, for a 15-year-old. But it was former Grand Prix driver Reg Parnell that took young Brian under his wing, really, and definitely saw the potential that he had and fast-tracked him. So much so that Brian was heavily involved in the very historic Le Mans 1-2 finish for Aston DBR1s in 1959. And in the months prior to the race, he was involved in the development team and learnt lots about aerodynamics, working with Aston's chief designer, Ted Cutting, and also chief engineer Brian Clayton. So that's not a bad thing to have on your CV as I think he was 19 back then. He stayed with Aston until 1961, when he went to work for Repco, short for Replacement Parts Company. And if you're over a certain age, you'll remember the Repco name because they sponsored a pre-knighted Jack Brabham's Formula One team and were heavily involved in his motor racing developments operation. And Brian worked there as an engineer. That company had a lot of history in Australia, his native Australia, founded by a chap called Jeff Russell in 1922. And yeah, Brian worked there for a little while. He reckons he learnt a lot there and enjoyed his time. Age 25, Brian set up an eponymous company, Brian Waite Enterprises Limited, just before his 25th birthday, actually. Although a lot of his work then was done, was on a commission or a retainer to John Wilmot, who at that time was running John Wilmot Racing. Amongst many other things, they were a race team. They were engine tuning operation, and they sold lots of speed parts, and much like many companies in the 60s. And they had various branches. One near Southampton. There was one, I believe, maybe Chiswick, Uxbridge Way. And the speed shop, John Wilmot's speed shop, was in Mitcham in Surrey, on the outskirts of, between Croydon and Morden, I guess. And even though Brian was based in Smarden in Kent at that time, he spent a lot of time at the Mitcham operation. He, when John Wilmot tried to buy a Shelby Daytona Cobra from Shelby American, Carroll Shelby wouldn't, for whatever reason, sell him one. So Wilmot thought outside the square and got and gave Brian a spare 289 Cobra chassis, and told him to design a car like the Shelby Coupe, Peter Brock designed coupe, using that chassis as his base. Apparently Shelby American, I'm not too sure why they wouldn't supply them a car, but they did supply them some blueprints for some Daytona coupe chassis drawings, and that helped Waite create the aerodynamic body of what became the Wilmot coupe. And the intention was to run that car at Le Mans in 64, but that didn't happen. And for whatever reason, it didn't happen in 65 or 66 either. So it was kind of a very pretty car. But it didn't have anywhere to race really, other than a few. Well, I think it might have raced other races other than Le Mans, which was the intention. In the end, it just became a very leery road car. But once again, Brian says he learnt a lot at Wilmot's operation. And he did other stuff as well. He did lots of other stuff. There were some special commissions that he did for customers, and lots of motorsport, running various drivers and cars, including a Ford Escort for a notable touring car driver of the day, a guy called Mike Crabtree. Although he particularly remembers the times that he worked with Jack Sears and really rated him very highly. And then came knocking the car that probably, despite the serious stuff in his career that he's done before that, a company called, the Outspan organisation came knocking. And initially they came looking for him to create for them some best described as giant oranges that would be fixed to poles. That I guess like the 76 oil balls that you see in by the side of the road in the US. And I think Outspan wanted something similar to promote their. I can't understand why. Well, all they did really was promote the orange. They didn't really promote. Well, obviously they did promote themselves, but really and truly they were promoting oranges in general, surely. But anyway, Brian created them for them, and they were very happy. And that was used at various exhibitions as promotional tool and stuff like that. I think he built several of them. While in the process of doing that job, he became good friends with Outspan's advertising director, a chap called Jeremy Nightingale, and his girlfriend, who was actually a former girlfriend of Mike Hawthorne, no less. But anyway. And what... I think the Outspan Orange car came about a wine-laden dinner meeting with Outspan's promotional team, from what I understand. And someone suggested, what we want is something like those big oranges you designed for us, Brian, that had wheels on that we could drive. Cue much laughter. The boss actually heard that and was laughing as much as all the staff, but had a quiet word to Brian and said, you could do that for us, couldn't you? To which Brian replied that he could, but end of the night came, and he thought nothing more of that, and thought it was just a bit of a laugh and a bit of a joke. I think from what Brian told me once, about 10 days later though, an official letter from Outspan turned up, and lo and behold, inside was an official order for a large quantity. I never did find out what the large quantity actually was in terms of numbers, but it was a large order, official order on headed paper for some Outspan Orange cars. What happened then was Brian started to build the prototype. He started it at Smarden, but actually he built the cars at Wilmot's base at Mitcham, bigger workshop. And one fly in the ointment that came along was that the Outspan got a new boss who wanted to ring the changes a little bit, and apparently had a fit. He went nuts when he saw in his in tray the order for X amount of Outspan Oranges and the development of the same motorised Outspans, and went nuts. And he did his best to try and cancel the whole order. Brian, kind of being Brian, told him that wouldn't be possible. In any case, it was done before he arrived. But in the end, they compromised. And so Brian was to finish the prototype, and 6 production, it even sounds funny saying it, 6 production Outspan Orange cars were to be built. The promotional activity around those cars was incredible. I remember them being everywhere in magazines and TV appearances and goodness knows what as a kid. In the early 70s, he started. They were built between 72 and 74, I should have said. And they certainly brought weight and publicity, but it was kind of, I guess it was like Jeff Beck's Hi-Ho Silver Lining that we all know and have heard umpteen times at various New Year's parties and God knows what. Jeff Beck was the late great Jeff Beck was so much more than that song, although obviously it earned him a lot of money. But he was so much more serious than that in terms of his incredible guitar playing. And likewise, there was so much more to Brian Waite than building motorised oranges. But that's what got him the publicity, and I don't suppose it did him any harm, and indeed he's very proud of those cars. I think it's a lot harder to build a motorised orange than it is to say it. It wasn't a question of just, I think the initial intention actually was to do just what I said earlier, cut some holes for windows and plonk those plastic orange promotional oranges that he'd done and just motorise them. But it became pretty apparent from very early on that was not going to be a goer. So Brian, being the engineer that he is, he settled down to work out how he would do it. And as you said, it seemed like a very good idea at the time. He never actually, even though he got loads of publicity, he claims never to have made a lot of money from that. He was just taking it on as the promotional benefit of it, I think. But what he actually ended up with was something very elaborate, actually. Fiberglass body, moulded in 2 pieces. But the hardest part was the basic chassis that had to underpin the whole kit and caboodle. He did build a space frame a very tiny space frame, and he did base it on Mini and used 2 subframes. The chassis rails had 100 kilograms of concrete, beg your pardon, in between the chassis rails, just to keep the thing on the ground and give it some ballast. Brian was very touchy when I asked him about the fact that they were they really nothing more than a motorised bowling ball. He said they were more stable than that, but he wouldn't. I don't think what I heard, 30 miles an hour and anything over that was a good idea. But they did weigh, I think they weighed 750 kilos, so they were quite a substantial little thing. Brian reckoned they could do 80 miles an hour, but that would take a lot braver man than me to do that, I would think. Of the 6 made, Brian owns one, still owns one, as well as the prototype. There's one at the National Motor Museum in Bewley. Outspan organisation still owned 3 of them. And then there was a mysterious yellow one. Was that an Outspan lemon? I didn't think they did lemons anyway, but never mind. A yellow one that went to South Africa, and as far as anyone knows, is still there. But the best thing about that was the little cars, whatever we could describe them as, they really put smiles on people's faces, and undoubtedly did help Outspan sell. Well, they helped sell. I think they helped greengrocers sell oranges, is probably the main pertinent point. But Outspan claimed to sold millions of extra Outspans, and I think everybody involved really was proud of what was achieved with it. Really, Brian even got into the Sunday Times magazine as a result of the Outspan cars. I always remember actually it must be about 1986. I was driving south on the A23 in Surrey, Coulsdon, Hooley, just before the M25 comes in. I beg your pardon, M23. The start of the M23 there. And I was going, I needed some fuel, so I stopped at the last petrol station before the M23. And I was turning across traffic, a very dark night I remember, and I was stopped, an orange stopped to let me go, and kind of scratched my head, a little bit bemused, and then behind it, lo and behold, were 2 more oranges. So I was still scratching my head when I paid the chap in the petrol station, and he said, "Did you see those oranges?" And I said, "Yeah, I did." It wasn't just me then. But anyway, that was quite funny at the time. I guess you had to be there, but that was quite funny. So I think the message was they were very well engineered. There was die-cast models of them made, so someone made some serious money out of that. And it certainly wasn't, from what I can gather, Brian. After Outspan Oranges, for Brian, he became quite well known for a nice line in Ford Escort engine conversions, where he'd stick V8s and Ford V6s into them. Much like a chap that he used to work with at John Willman, Jeff Ewan, later of Race Proved, had done with his Ford conversions. He also did at least one special Ford Transit van conversion, which had an Essex V6 in it and was pretty rapid and turned a few heads. And he still, I think until fairly recently, was getting fan letters on those, certainly from Japan, people writing to him just simply as to the man who makes oranges, England. After that, he ABS, run by Sir John Samuel, wanted Brian to design an electric vehicle in the late 70s. He duly built a prototype, but that project never got off the ground. And then is something he's really very proud of. There was, I think, it was called the car chair, which effectively was a way for disabled people to gain entry or get into a car. It was like a cradle type effort that retained their dignity, and was a very clever piece of kit. I think he sold a few of them. I don't even know if he sold that project on, but that was something he was very pleased about. I think actually it was a management buyout from that. And then Brian got into something that got him a lot of publicity. He'd noticed in the US, in particularly around the Nebraska area, there was some houses made from straw bales. And that intrigued him. And he decided to create his own and offer them in kit form, much like Hoof and others do in Germany, although they don't use straw bales. So he set about designing a house that just happened to be made from straw bales. A very pretty looking house, actually. That was in Smarden in Kent. And that acted as his show home, indeed. And apparently he told me that they were popular in Nebraska, certain parts of Nebraska where there aren't many trees. So therefore plenty of straw. He was convinced and is convinced of the strength of these things and the beauty of the concept, and sold quite a few over the years. Although most of them went overseas. I think 60% were sold into Germany and Austria. Austria was also another very big sort of destination for Brian's houses. You can still look at that website for that. That's at Strawbale House, strawbalehouse.co.uk. Although I was amused to see that I think Brian sold that house building project on to another to a construction company. And what I found very delicious and delightful was that he hasn't just sold it to, excuse me, Acme Construction or AB Construction. He sold it to a company, and wait for this, a company called Huff and Puff Construction. Now that is a fantastic name as far as I'm concerned. And I think you can find them on the web, and I should have checked. I think it's huffandpuff.co.uk, but Google Strawbale House or Huff and Puff Construction, who are the current makers of Brian Waite's straw bale houses. I think you'll be pretty surprised when you see the images on the site of those houses. But anyway, that's a fun little episode on a fun little car and a very serious designer, and a talented one at that. And if you've enjoyed this episode and you've got this far, 23 odd minutes in, if you haven't subscribed already, could you please do so? That will help us greatly. And if you could also hit that like button, that helps out the site's algorithm and puts us in to the feeds of more like-minded people like us who enjoy specialist in kit cars. If you're new around here and you've enjoyed this one, then that's great. I'm really pleased, and thank you for visiting. And regardless of how many times you visited the channel, thank you so much for giving up a time of your day, a part of your day to listen to our channel. And I hope you enjoy the other episodes that we've already got on there, and indeed in the future. And we've got plenty of good stuff. Well, I think they're good stuff upcoming in the History Files series. And that's about it for today. So thank you so much for visiting. Oh, while I remember, we do these videos in association with Neil Winnington's Enwin Motors channel. If you could spare an extra 5 minutes and head over to Neil's channel and do what I asked you to do here, I'll be very, very grateful, and so would Neil. And it just enables us to do a little bit more that we want to do, really, and gives us confidence indeed that we're on the right path with these videos. So, as I say, wherever you are in the world, whatever you're doing, whatever time of day it is, thanks for visiting. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I look forward to welcoming you again soon. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Joel Mutton, and you're watching the Total Kit Car YouTube channel. Ding dong.
Hello and welcome to a brand new collaboration between Enwin's Motors YouTube channel and the TKC Magazine YouTube channel. Now, those of you familiar with the channels, and if you're watching this on Patreon, surely you are, will know that we've had a lot of success with our History File series, where we take the magazine's extensive photo archive and provide voiceover to explain the stories of some of the cars and the manufacturers and the people of the industry in the past that helped to make the industry we have today. Well, what we're doing on this series is a similar thing, using the video archive from both channels to create more extensive videos on various cars or types of cars. By combining the video archive from both channels, we can actually show a little bit more to our individual Patreon supporters than you would get from one of the channels individually. Moreover, after 12 months, this will then filter onto YouTube. So if you're watching this on YouTube, there are another 11 episodes waiting for you on Patreon. So if you enjoyed it, then why not go to one of the Patreon pages for Enwin's Motors or TKC Magazine and catch up on the rest. Anyway, without further ado, here is this month's video.